Recording in progress. Okay, good evening or good morning. Hope all is well with everybody. We are going to continue tonight where we left off last week. I'm going to put up one slide, just going to look at it for a minute, and then I'm going to take it down and probably won't have another slide till later on. And that slide is filled with words that you all know. And this is the slide. It's the beginning of the structure of a basic bracha. Now, not every bracha has Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, but I'm going to do all those words. What I want to look at tonight is some things that people either take for granted or don't understand. We're going to look at, just like you see these bullet points, we're going to talk about each one of those in a moment, but I want to make sure that one thing is very clear when it comes to a bracha. If you look in the English translation in most sidurim, it almost sounds like you're giving a bracha to God, you're blessing God. And many people look at the idea of saying a bracha as blessing God. Well, that would be sacrilegious because God doesn't need anything. Because to bless God means Hashem needs something. He doesn't need anything. That's first of all. And second of all, Hashem doesn't need our bracha. Imagine for a moment a little ant crawling on the ground could speak. And it wants to do something, and it wants to give you a blessing. Well, the ant's blessing is meaningless, considering the tiny little nothingness of a brain it may have. So it doesn't really mean anything. So if we were to bless, quote unquote, God, okay, that wouldn't be any good. It doesn't make any sense. Now, there is a concept in halacha known as birkat Hashem, where you do bless God, but that's what's called in English a euphemism. In Aramaic, sagi nahor. What is a euphemism? One of the things that is a horrific thing to do is to curse God, using the name of God with a curse. So that doesn't end well in the time of the Beit HaMikdash when there was a Sanhedrin for someone who does. But instead of saying the words curse and God in the same breath, so the Gemara and other places refer to it as birkat Hashem, blessing God, is a euphemism. So let's get that one thing out of the way, that when we say a bracha, we are not blessing God. So what is it that we're doing? So we have to really go almost word by word of what's happening here. And we're going to start with the word Baruch. In Hebrew, words are words are more powerful and meaningful than any other language on earth. And this is not a class in Hebrew. Maybe one day I will give something expanded on it, but let's just take the general idea. I'm sure most of you are aware that when you have a word in Hebrew, a verb especially, that it has a shoresh. Shoresh means a root. There's dispute among grammarians in Hebrew of how long a shoresh can be. Usually, the vast majority will say it's 3 letters. For example, lishmor, to watch, lamed shin mem vav resh. The shoresh is shin mem resh. And you can see it show as shmira, mishmeret, ashmoret. Okay, so actually, no, that doesn't work there. But so that's the 3. There are some that will say it could be 2 letters and some will say it could be 4 letters. It doesn't make a difference for our discussion tonight. But the reason you need to know this idea of the root of a word is we're going to look at and talk about this a couple times. The word Baruch has as its shoresh, bet resh kaf. And I mentioned at the end of last week when we just I mentioned some of the questions I'm going to raise, is the word bet resh kaf in Hebrew means derech, which means a knee, on your leg, a knee. So the obvious question is, what in the world is there a connection between bet resh kaf, meaning knee, and a bracha? Now, I'm going to mention to you, and this is true about many, many things we're going to do over the next many long years. When I say something as an example or as an explanation, it is by no means the only explanation. That's like, if I've said this many times, if someone reads a pasuk, it says the explanation is, they don't know what they're talking about. What do I mean? Because there is no the explanation. There's no such thing. There's an explanation. Same thing is true when it comes to these things, when it comes to Tefilla. I'm going to give you some insights into some of these words. So the connection. If you've ever seen any old movies, I don't know if you see, they do in modern movies at all, but you say like the ancient Romans especially, and it would appear in other areas, when a servant wanted to show his fealty to his master, to his king, to his leader, to his ruler, he would go down on a knee. It takes a different interpretation there. I'm not talking about taking a knee and that's shtuyot. I'm not talking about that at all. He would go down on his knee and very often go like this, and to show his fealty and his allegiance to that king. So on the most simplistic level, every time we say the word Baruch, we're ki'ilu going on our knee in submission to God and saying that we are pledging our full and complete allegiance to Hashem with that word Baruch. Ki'ilu, we've gone down on the knee and be subservient to God. But there's a little bit deeper meaning also when it means a knee. What does the knee do? What's its function in the body? So we know it's a connector, right? Because without the knee, there's a book that's a book called Do Penguins Have Knees? I don't remember the answer, but it's the name of the book. It's a book of trivia. So what does the knee do? It takes the upper part of the body and the lower part, and it allows it to flex, right? It should, God forbid, not go like this or like this, but it should go a little bit like this to allow you to move. So number one, the word Baruch, if it's connecting to the word Berech, is a connector between this world, our physical world, and the world of Hashem, so to speak, the spiritual world. That's one. But again, in a deeper meaning, what does the knee enable you to do? It enables you to move forward or backwards, but hopefully forward. Why? Because if you don't have knees, if your leg is straight, you need other things to propel you, whether it's crutches, a chair, or something. The knee bends to enable your legs to move, to allow you to walk. So again, with the word Baruch, what we're also signifying is that with this bracha, the blessing we're about to make, we're also moving forward. We're moving forward towards Hashem. We're moving forward towards Kedusha or holiness, which we're going to talk about in a little while. And another thing, which is absolutely fascinating. Why is it that we want to signify the concept of moving forward? It is pointed out indirectly, and we talked about this back when we were learning Sefer Kuzari, that there's nothing that exists in nature that is square. Nothing in nature is square. There's no square fruit. There's no square planet, unless you're Bizarro World and Superman. There's nothing, there's no square animals, nothing. What is the most common shape is round. Head, the planets, many, many things are round. What's the obvious difference between the two besides the shape? Something that's round like a ball moves, it propels, you can take it and move it. A square, a cube, I should say, sits, it's stationary, it doesn't go anywhere until you pick it up. And even if you roll it, it's going to make one turn, that's it. Again, the purpose being to tell us that we can't plateau. You always need to be moving. And like a ball, it could be going forward or backwards. It's up to us. And we see this actually in Parashat Shavua many, many weeks ago. I think it's the end of Truma, but I won't swear to it. Someone knows, please just let me know. It says that when they built the Mishkan, that eventually the Beit HaMikdash, when they built the Mishkan, the portable tabernacle in the desert, it says, when you would go up to the altar, to the Mizbeach, there was a kevesh, or a ramp, not steps. It specifically says there should not be steps. There should only be a ramp. Why did Hashem care if when they were going to bring a korban, they're going to bring a sacrifice on the altar, that there would be steps, there wouldn't be steps? So the practical statement the Torah tells us is, so lo tigale ervato, so that the Kohen who didn't have anything on under his tunic, when he's going up the steps, he picks up his legs, it wouldn't be tsanua, it wouldn't be modest. But again, the deeper meaning is that when you are going, what's the purpose of bringing a korban, of bringing a sacrifice? And we talked about this a week or two ago. It's lahit karev, to come closer to God. Kuf, resh, bet is the shoresh, to come closer to God, to connect to God. So if your goal by bringing a korban, your goal in bringing this sacrifice on the altar was to come closer to Hashem, which means you're trying to grow also in your area of Kedusha, or holiness, you don't want to be doing it on steps. Why? Because on steps, it's easy to plateau. I can walk up a set of stairs and just stop and stand still. It doesn't hurt me, doesn't do anything, I just stop. But a kevesh, a ramp, you're either going forward, you're going up, or you're sliding back. There's no just standing still. And as you all know, it's harder to walk up and it's easy to slide backwards. So it's all symbolic. So we get that also from the word Baruch. Another possible meaning of the word Baruch is Bracha, like a wellspring. that everything, the source of everything comes from Hashem, but I'm pushing that off for a minute because we're going to see that in a little bit in a different part of a bracha. And again, there are many, many other interpretations of Baruch that I want to move on though. Question we raised last week was a linguistic problem. With the exception of English, almost all the languages I'm aware of, which thankfully is many, I don't speak a lot, but I'm saying I'm aware of many languages, make a distinction between when you speak to somebody who is of a higher station than you. That's not really a right word, but let's say, for example, a student talking to a teacher, person talking to a professor, to their doctor, to someone who has a different level than they may be at. You talk in third person. I'll say it in English so you understand what I mean. I would say, for example, and I gave the example last week, if I were to talk to Rav Aviner, the Rav here in the community, I wouldn't say to him, would you like a cup of water? I would say, would the Rav, like a cup of water? That's stilted in English because we don't speak that way. But if you go back to Old English, you would hear something like that. You'd hear, would my Lord care for this, for example. But in almost every language, you speak in third person to someone like that. So, which would mean that in Hebrew, we would say, like I said, would the rabbi want? And yet when we talk to the Melech Malchei HaMelachim, when we talk to the King of Kings, when we talk to Hashem, we say, Baruch Atah. I'm just going to use the vernacular. You are blessed. Doesn't mean that. Okay, it means you're the source of all bracha. Okay, but why would we say Atah? Why would we say it in second person? Like I would say to my friend, would you like a cup of water? Right? So we have a dual relationship with Hashem. What should it have said? Baruch Hu. He is blessed. Again, using the vernacular, the common term. He is blessed, not you are blessed, or you are the source of bracha. We'd say he is the source of all bracha. And to even make the question stronger, the second half of the bracha is in third person. We talk about Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav, that he commanded us, right? Or he infused us with kedusha and with commandments, and he commanded us. Didn't say you commanded us. So we have this almost two different approaches within one sentence, second person and third person. So we have to start off by understanding that we have a dual relationship with Hashem. And I use the word on purpose, relationship. And I said this in the first class, you have to look at your life, and especially davening, but anything with your life as a relationship with Hashem. It's a relationship. It's a give and take. We're the bigger takers. He's the great giver. We're the big taker because we don't really need to quote give Hashem anything. But how do we characterize this dual relationship? So we know that we have the concept, what's called Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, Abba, and our Melech. We don't call him Malkeinu Avinu. We call him Avinu Malkeinu. The order is very, very clear. We start off that our relationship is that of a parent. Now, it is not uncommon for a child to sometimes refer to their parent when they talk to them, also in third person in Hebrew. But more often than not, the relationship is such that they will talk in second person. Abba, Dad, you want a cup of water? Not Haima Abba rotze kos mayim. Would father like a cup? Although it can be done. By starting off a bracha with the word atah, we are solidifying this understanding that our clear relationship with Hashem, we can come to Hashem in the first place, is that he is our father. Abba, he's dad. It's not an original idea, but you know that I do a lot of stuff that has to do with imagery. And I've heard from many speakers that one of the interesting ways they approach Shmona Esrei, Bracha, but especially Shmona Esrei, and it works here for this topic tonight, is that you walk into this room, these big double doors open up, this massive room, and behind the desk is Hashem, a spiritual, there's nothing physical, spirit. And the desk is piled high with requests from hundreds of millions of people. And he goes like this to all the requests and said, come here, what can I do for you? Come, right? I want to talk to you. What do you need? Well, you have all those other requests. Yeah, it's fine, it's fine. you're here with me now. Talk to me. Imagine for a moment, you have a CEO of a multi-million-dollar corporation, and he has people coming in, and they're sitting like this because they're nervous in front of the CEO, and he's saying he's doing, and he's or she, and then his 4-year-old grandson is brought into the room. He melts, right? Oh, come on, get out of here, guys. And he comes, he sits on the grandfather's lap, and he's happy and all. What's the difference? Just another person, but it's not. It's someone who's their family. It's their child. So even though we believe, of course, that all humanity are children of Hashem, we're all created in the image of God, even though sometimes it's a little hard to understand with certain so-called people. But the Gadol, we are all children of Hashem, but we have a special relationship with God, a very special one. And that relationship is this Ata connection, the you, or the Avinu. Now, the Malkeinu part, the Melech part, we're going to come to also in the Bracha. So we have the Avinu is Ata, it's the you. The Malkeinu we're going to come to when we talk about the Melech HaOlam. We're going to get there in a minute. But I want to go one more minute on this Ata, this change between second person, third person, and we're going to see it in an area. I thought I had this great novel idea until I thought about it and sent it to somebody, and he said it was already mentioned by the Vilna Gaon. So at least I thought of something the Vilna Gaon did. Every Shabbat, depending on your nusach, you say at least 1, 2, 3 or 4 times Mizmor Shir Le'Yom HaShabbat, which, by the way, the whole Mizmor has nothing to do with Shabbat, which is another question you can ask yourselves a different time. We say this is a Mizmor, a psalm for Shabbat, and it has nothing to do with Shabbat whatsoever. Well, at least it doesn't seem to. So that's your own homework for down the road. But we say Mizmor Shir Le'Yom HaShabbat, right? What are the words we say? Tov lehodot l'Hashem. It is good to give thanks to God. Ulezamer b'shimcha elyon. And to sing to you in your name. We went from third person, Tov lehodot l'Hashem. It's good to give praise to God. And then something about Zmira or Zimba, music and song, to you, to your name. How do we change? Why would it be Tov lehodot l'Hashem? Ulezamer lishmo elyon, to his glorified, exalted name, right? Makes sense. It's just, again, we went from third person to second person. So what my idea was that Tov lehodot Hashem is a statement that it is good to give praise to him, to Hashem. And the more we do it, and the closer we get, it's l'zamer l'shimcha elyon, that we connect with Hashem as opposed to just him, in quotes. Now it becomes you. It's your. It's this. We go from almost Malkeinu to Avinu. So we have this different, this connection in both directions. And that's really what's happening at the beginning of the Bracha as well. When we talk about Hashem, we say Baruch Atah, and the word is Ado and Nai. And I can actually say Hashem's name is if I'm teaching, but I prefer to say and in the middle just to break it up. The word Ado and Nai has the connotation, it's spelled with a Yud, a Hey, a Vav, and a Hey. And without going into all this, there's so much Kabbalistic stuff on this. And as a matter of fact, for those of you who come to the Tanya class, we're going to talk about it on Tuesday night, Dafka, Bezrat Hashem. But it potentially has a meaning, is many, many meanings. So one of them being, it stands for words, Haya, Oveh, V'Hiyeh, was, is, and always will be. But we talk, Hashem is eternal, that Hashem transcends time, which is the most impossible thing for a finite mind to understand the infinite. What do you mean Hashem has always been here? When did he start? Who made Hashem? I mean, these are questions you get from kids and from adults. What do you mean Hashem always was? What do you mean he always will be? We can't understand it. But I just now take it for granted that we're talking about in the bracha, we use the shame of Yud Kei Vav, okay? For a reason. Not only do we know that the names of Hashem indicate different, have different meanings behind them, and we'll see another one in a minute, but also they represent different character traits. And again, all these I'm speaking anthropomorphically, giving human qualities to God. One of which is that the name Ado and Nai represents the midah, or the character trait of chesed. Chesed. Kindness, and giving with no conditions. It's the kindness aspect of Hashem. So that when we start a bracha, Baruch Atah and the name Ado and Nai, that we're acknowledging that we don't deserve anything, right? Let's just say you make a bracha on an apple. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam borei pri ha'etz. So what is this Ado and Nai? What is the chesed? I don't deserve the apple. What have I done in my life to deserve that apple? Well, that's a ridiculous statement. Maybe I did some mitzvot. No, we don't. There's nothing. There's no magiali in Judaism. There's nothing. Oh, I deserve this because I did. There's no quid pro quo. It doesn't work like that, except in Hashem's way of running the world, and therefore we can't really intuit what it is He gives us and doesn't give us because of our actions, almost ever. So we're asking that everything we're doing now, we're acknowledging the chesed of Hashem. We use the terminology, Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Adonai, name of God, to indicate the chesed that we are given. I just had a student about 2 hours ago, and I asked her, like I've asked many students before, that there's a one-word answer. We talked about this maybe already. What do you have to thank God for? And the answer is everything. There's nothing that we have for which we don't have to say thank you, because there's nothing we could do without Hashem. The fact that you're breathing, you're seeing, you're listening, you're talking, you can move your fingers, your toes, whatever it might be. The fact that you can think, the fact that you can think outside the box, which if you don't know where that comes from, look it up. It's an interesting reason. That all's from Hashem, every single thing. So now, what does that mean that Hashem's names have different meanings and different facets? So I know that some of you have heard this from me before, but an idea popped into my head a number of years ago, and I've used this as an example. I don't have with me right now, but I'm just going to use my own, just plain round gold ring. But picture I have a diamond on the top of this ring, right? I took a diamond ring, and I ask you, how many stones are there? The answer is, assuming it's one stone, it's one stone, right? But if I put my standing outside and I start going like this to it, and I ask you, how many colors do you see? Well, you see green, blue, red, yellow. Well, how can that be? It's only one stone. Why are you seeing all these colors? It's not painted. And in fact, that would be against the laws of, God forbid, of diamonds. One of the 3 C's is clarity, right? So the clarity of the stone wants to be as clear and pure as possible. But yet when I move it around, it has a prismatic effect and I get different colors, but it's still one stone. So just like we say there's shiv'im panim l'Torah, that there's 70 facets to Torah, that you could look at something from all different angles, yet it's still just the same Torah. So too with Hashem, kiviyachol, and again, in an anthropomorphic way, that Hashem has different ways He relates to us, to human beings. In this case, we're talking about in the Yud Kei Vav Kei, but then we move into the name Elokeinu. So we started Baruch Atah with Ado and Nai. Now we're going to refer to Hashem in the third person. We have approached Hashem as our Avinu, as our father, and now we're going to approach Hashem as Malkeinu, as our Melech, because we say Elokeinu Melech Olam. But let's talk about the name Elokim. A question I raised last week is the name of Hashem, whether it's Yud Kei Vav Kei, whether it's Ado and Nai, whether it's Shakai, which we pronounce Shaddai, whether it's Tzvaot, which if it's used as God's name, it's Tzvakot, a whole bunch of different names. Everything is singular, but the word Elohim is plural. There's only one God. And what is the Shoresh of Elohim? It's not Elokah. It's El. Aleph, Lamed. Now it's a noun, not a verb. So, but still the base of the word is El. And what does El mean? It does not mean God. It means power. El Moshaot. Michamocha ba'elim Hashem, mikamocha, v'chulei, v'chulei. So the word El means power. And therefore the word Elohim means powers. So that makes the problem even more. It almost sounds like there's, God forbid to say, there's the powers. There's the power of the night, there's the power of the day, the power of the stars, the power of the moon. God forbid. So what does it mean? It means powers, but it means that it's the Hashem is the source of all that power. Just like I was saying to you before, we have to thank Hashem for everything we have. The ability to blink and move our hands and think and do all those things that our body moves internally without us even realizing it. All those things are power, koach, and it all the sources from Hashem. If you picture, let's say I have the phone and it's plugged in, and the battery is no good anymore. Stam, I'm saying. And the only way it works is if it's plugged in. As soon as I unplug it, it stops. So therefore, as long as I'm plugged in, the phone works. As soon as I stop and I pull the plug, the battery has the phone is useless. It's just a doorstop. So anything that we have, any power, any abilities to do anything, the koach comes from Hashem. So when we say Hashem is Elohim, Hashem is powers, it doesn't mean Hashem is multiple beings, but rather this one being has given us the power that everything that exists is Hashem. Take the example for any of you who are old enough to, I know no one is obviously in this group, but if you had heard of a show growing up called Lost in Space, you would know certain names, or the Time Tunnel, or things like that. You've heard of Alpha Centauri, you've heard of Beetlejuice later on in life and all. These are not just cute names that were shown on TV, but these are names of stars. And when you start to look at the massive amount, what the universe is, which is the measurable universe, if I'm not mistaken, it's 110,000 light years across, whatever. It's some massive amount, massive amount. There's a video I'd be happy to post afterwards, which I've shown to other classes, which shows from starting at Mars and working its way out to the known universe. And when you get to this, realize how insignificant, forget Earth, the Milky Way galaxy is. Now we're a speck in the Milky Way galaxy. The Milky Way galaxy is a speck in the universe, literally a dust ball in the entire universe. That everything that's happening that we will never, ever see, all that exists out there, the fact that certain things are circling and going in orbits and whatever they might be doing, and stars are exploding and new planets are being born, it's also from Hashem. Just like I can go like this with my fingers. It's no difference. It's the same thing. That's the power. That's the Elohim. Melech haolam, and that's the continuation of the phrase. He's the king of the universe. And again, what does the word olam mean? For the word ne'elam, hidden. That you don't walk around, you don't see, hey God, how you doing, right? We don't see Hashem, but we see Hashem in everything. That's why I've said it, I don't think this is original. When we talk about Yirat Hashem, very often it's referred to in English as the fear of God. I prefer to say that one of the meanings is to see God, the word lirot, to see God in everything. Whether it's the mountains or the traffic, you could see God even. Like, oh, people use God, let me get home already, so you see God in everything. So when we say that Hashem is the Melech Olam, we have now just acknowledged two things in the first part of the bracha. Baruch Atah, I have a special relationship with you. You're my Abba. You're the Atah. You, it's just you and me. On the other hand, it's the Melech Olam. God is the king of absolutely everything in the universe. This vast thing that we will never be able to picture in our minds, to fathom. And what does Hashem do? Asher kidishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu. Yesterday in Shul, around the world, we read two parashot, Acharimot and Kedoshim. Parenthetically, I'm sure many of you have noticed that over the years, those parashot are read always in the time of Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaShoah, Acharimot, Kedoshim, after the death of the holy ones, which is a very significant meaning, obviously. So he infused us with Kedusha, with his mitzvot, with his commandments, and he commanded us to do X. That's basically the rest of the bracha. Well, what does this mean? What is Kedusha? Now, there are two words I've asked people in general to translate, and they always translate the English, but it's meaningless. One is korban, and we say sacrifice in English, which is what we say, but it's not what it means. We already talked about that, because it means it's an action that brings you closer to God. And the other is Kedusha. What is Kedusha? What is holiness? So before we go into what it is, you all can have your own vision of what Kedusha is. There's another thought I had a long time ago. In Hebrew, Kedusha, the shoresh is Kuf, Daled, Shin. If you rearrange those letters, you get another word that the shoresh gives us, Shkida. Shkida means effort. Shin Kuf Daled, not Shkediya. Shkida. Shkida means effort in Hebrew. Kedusha, or holiness, doesn't happen by itself. It requires work. It requires effort. I cannot wake up one day and say, I'm holy. Yo, look at me, I'm holy. Well, on the one hand, I can, and so can you. How do I know that? In Sefer Shemot, Hashem tells the Bnei Israel, "Atenti yuli mamlechet kohanim." You shall be for me a people of priests, v'goy kadosh, and a holy nation. We, by the dint of the fact we're Jewish, we're infused with a level of kedusha, of holiness. But what does that mean? We also know that there's different types of kedusha. Right now, I'm just going to use it very freely with no real definition yet. We have three main areas of kedusha. One is objects, things, right? The Sefer Torah innately has kedusha. Tefillin innately has kedusha. A chumash. A person, a Jew, innately has kedusha. There's also place. Place can have kedusha. My living room and the area of the Kotel HaMaravi, and even more so Har HaBayit, do not have the same level of kedusha. My living room is what it is. It's a living room. Maybe I have kedusha when I learn in there or teach in there or whatever I might do, but it's not a makom kadosh per se. The Har HaBayit and Beit HaMikdash, Shibane B'Mahea B'Yameinu Amen, has the highest level of kedusha, and specifically in the Kodesh Kodashim, in the Holy of Holies. And also, even among Am Yisrael, there's different levels of kedusha. We know that a Kohen has a higher level of kedusha than the Levi or the Yisrael, and there are halachot that go with that. I'm going to mention in a minute. And finally, so we have place. We have place. We have things or people, right? People. And then we also have one other, and that's time. I'm not talking about like time is holy and time is valuable. Time, Shabbat, Chag, right? That is a time specific. What's the difference between a Tuesday afternoon and Shabbat afternoon? The holiness of Shabbat. So we have person, place, time. Tomorrow, this week in Shul, last week in Achrei Mot, we learned a lot of things about Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, what happens? The holiest person, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, enters the holiest place, Kodesh Kodashim, in the Beit HaMikdash, on the holiest day of the year, Yom Kippur. So you have the confluence of the holiest person, place, and time, all the same moment, once a year. We will again, Bezrat Hashem. So that the concept of Kedusha, even without defining it, you start getting a little bit of a feel of what does it really mean, Kadosh. So Rashi translates and others translate Muvdalu Mufrash, separate. What does that mean? Separating yourself. Let's say a person, this is a very poor, not poor, but very blah example, but I'm going to use it anyways. If a person is in a group of friends and they're not the best of people, I talk Lashon Hara here and there, they don't do certain things right, whatever it might be, and you decide that you don't want to be influenced by them, you want to improve yourself. So what do? You separate from that group because you know that that group's no good for you anymore. It could be even toxic in a spiritual way. They may be very nice people, but they don't do you good in your Jewish growth. So you separate from them. That's a matter of fact, that's a form of kedusha. You're elevating yourself. Anything you do to make yourself closer to Hashem, to do Hashem's will, is elevating yourself in levels of kedusha. That's one thing. Other areas. There is a Hasidic play on words that is on the last, again, is the timing of this is amazing. I love how Hashem does this. The end of this past week's parasha, where Hashem, let me just call it up here, just a minute, read it to you. Oops. See, it'd be easier and faster just to stand up and take the book off my shelf, but lazy. What can I say? Okay. Sefer Vayikra. Parashat Kedoshim. Zion. Okay. The end of Parashat Kedoshim says as follows. As soon as it comes up. Kedoshim, here it is. Okay. Pasuk says as follows. V'temli kedoshim, ki kadosh ani Hashem. You shall be holy to me, or act holy, because I'm holy. Right? The parsha starts off. Kedoshim tiyu, ki kadosh ani Hashem elokech. Be holy, because I'm holy. And now it ends with a similar phrase. V'temli kedoshim, you should be holy, ki kadosh ani Hashem, because I am holy. And then the pasuk continues. Va'avdil etchem min ha'amim liot li. And I will separate you from other nations to be mine. Now, if we translate or we explain Kedusha as muvdal umufrash, separating ourselves, it's really saying the same thing twice. On the one hand, it says, we, V'ten li, Hashem says to us, we have to be kadosh. We have to do that and separate ourselves. And then Hashem says, Va'avdil etchem, I'll separate you. So which is it? Do we separate ourselves and make ourselves separate from the non-Jews and from the influences of the people who are not good? Or does Hashem do it? So there's a Hasidic play on words and says as follows. First time I heard it actually was in Yiddish. It sounds better. In any case, in English. Hashem says like this, you have to make Kiddush, meaning we have to separate ourselves from Lashon Kedusha. But God forbid you don't, and you get in the wrong path. And then people start intermarrying, and there's more and more problems. Hashem says, I'm going to have to make Havdalah. I'm going to have to separate you. I'm going to have to step in and make sure, through whatever means, that I will separate you from these other people. So our requirement, our need and growth when it comes to the mitzvah of Kedusha is to always find which is those things that are taking us down, those things that are doing the opposite of what we need to do, and separating from those things. I'm not even talking about non-kosher and other, not even that. Is because the Rambam and others say you should be mekadesh yourself, you should sanctify yourself, you should enholy yourself, there's no such word. Afil mina mutar lach, even those things that are mutar for you to eat. And some of you have heard this before in other classes, that, for example, I can sit down if I wanted to, and my wife wasn't looking, I can have 5, 6, 7 hamburgers if I wanted to, right? But it's disgusting, right? It's being a glutton. So I'm allowed to, doesn't mean I can. I should rather. So when I say I'm not going to do that, I really want 5 hamburgers, but I'm only going to have 1 or 2, because otherwise it's really not right to take too much of the gashmias of this physical world. It's also a form of kedusha. But what does it mean? He made us holy with his mitzvot. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotat. He made us holy with his mitzvot. So for that, I think part of the answer becomes self-evident. I started off by saying in this section, that the pasuk says in Parshat Yitro, "Vaten tiyu li mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh." You will be for me a nation of priests and a holy nation, right? Kingdom of priests and a holy nation. To do that, Hashem had to give us a vehicle. If I tell you, I need you to make 1,000 copies of a book, not a book, a page, that'd be ridiculous. 1,000 copies of a page of paper. Now, if we were living in the 10th century, God forbid, it'd be handwritten. And good luck with that. Nowadays, what would you need? A copier. You need a copier machine. So if I tell you to make 1,000 copies of something, but I leave you and I need it in an hour, and then I lock you in a room with no copier, I've set you up for a complete failure. I don't give you the chance even to do that. You go into the copy room and you start making the first copy, and of course it's going to say, needs toner. That always happens to me. Or out of paper. How is it there's one piece of paper always before I make my copies at school? I don't know. I'm always putting paper in. So there had to be a vehicle for carrying out that mission, right? Your job was to make 1,000 copies. In order to do that, you need the copy machine. Our mission is to become holy, is to grow in the Kedusha. But to do that, we needed a vehicle for that. And the vehicle is Taryag Mitzvot, 613 commandments, of which no one person can accomplish all 613. Some are only men, some are only women, some are only Kohanim, some are at the time of the Beit HaMikdash. Some, you get my drift. So how can we say we keep all 613 mitzvot? Because we look at ourselves, at Am Yisrael, as one body. So that when a Kohen does a mitzvah that I cannot do, then that Kohen is added to my mitzvot count as well, so to speak. I'm also benefiting as part of your mitzvot, and you're benefiting as part of mine. So to grow in Kedusha, which we can only do through mitzvot, because there's nothing you do that's a mitzvah that can't help you elevate and grow. There's the opposite. You do an isur, to do something wrong, and you go the wrong way. But to grow, you need mitzvot. Those are that's the vehicle. I'm going to go back for a minute and just comment for 1 minute on something I talked about Kohanim. I said that Kohanim have a special level of Kedusha. Sadly, there's a mitzvah in the Torah. I started that wrong. In the mitzvah, in the Torah, there's a mitzvah that sadly is not well known, and that's as follows. We all know that in the time of the Beit HaMikdash, Kohanim had preferential treatment. They were the upper crust. They were the ones who worked in the Beit HaMikdash on our behalf. They're the ones who brought their korbanot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Today, what's the Kohanim known for? Oh, he's going to be the one who benches. He's the Kohen. Oh, Kohen should bench. Okay, that's nice. That's true. But let me tell you a little bit of information. If you're in line at a buffet, there's a Kohen standing behind you, you're supposed to let the Kohen go first. If there's a Kohen carrying something or doing something, you're supposed to offer to help. If there is a Kohen who you come and you're serving food at a table, let's say I have guests and I have Kohanim and non-Kohanim. The Kohanim have the right to take the food first, before the Balabayit, before your grandfather, before the Kohanim have the right to take first. In all these cases, the Kohen can say, no, go ahead. They can overlook their Kohen, their Kohuna, but they can't. But you have to make that available. So I have been. I'll tell you a very fast story with Gidon Marv. When I was living in Chicago, and for Thanksgiving, my mom, she should live and be well, used to always have a buffet at her house, and my dad al Shalom at their house for Thanksgiving. And I have lots of Kohanim in my family. My sister married a Kohen, and she had a number of kids, Baruch Hashem. So I was standing in this line in buffet at my mom's house, and right behind me was my nephew, who's now married with kids, Baruch Hashem. He was maybe 4 or 5. I said, "You go first." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because you're a Kohen." He says to me, I still remember his voice, "But you're the rabbi." I thought it was very sweet. I said, "Yeah, but you're a Kohen. The Kohen goes first. You go ahead." And of course he did. But you should. It's a mitzvah. You're doing a mitzvah when you enable a Kohen to go first, to take first, to make the bracha first, whatever it might be. That's part of the mitzvah of giving a Kohen. I'm going to stop here, even though there's much more to say. Continue Bezrat Hashem next week a little bit more. And then the topic next week, I'll give you a little intro on WhatsApp, and we'll get together next week Bezrat Hashem.